Hello, and welcome to Conversations with Nick Thompson. You may know me from Netflix Love is Blind, but on this podcast, we sit down with guests from all walks of life to hear their story, remove stigmas, and uncover what makes them tick. Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's edition of Conversations with Nick Thompson. I am Nick Thompson, and I'm happy to have you here. Today, we're going to have an amazing guest. He's actually a personal friend of mine. His name's Jonathan Villacres, and he is actually my yoga instructor. And the reason that I wanted to have Jonathan on today was not just to talk about yoga or to talk about his journey, but to really talk about this culture that he was a part of that wasn't working for him. And that's a corporate culture. And I remember he is so transparent and basically puts himself out there through his yoga practice and through his wellness routines that he is incredibly relatable. And I remember one of the first classes I took with him when he first moved back from a experience in Ecuador, where he came back because it didn't work out the way he wanted, and he started teaching yoga classes. So right away, getting to know Jonathan, he was sharing the lessons that he had learned on this adventure, and then he would theme the class around those adventures and those lessons. Learning from Jonathan how he would talk at the beginning of class and then sum it up at the end of class, and there was always a lesson learned. If he was having a bad day, he would say, I haven't been feeling my best today, but we're going to make this practice around finding our best self. And he would theme the class, and his commentary throughout the class would be about finding your best self. Or in other instances, when he was having a great day, he loves summertime. It's one of the best things about him is he's always out and about and enjoying the summertime weather, and he loves the heat. And when we would have our first nice days, he would always talk about finding the sun and your life and all of these really, really positive energy and feelings that he would share with all of us. Jonathan would often take the bus or public trans to the yoga studio. And one day I was just chatting with him after class and asked him if he just wanted to ride home because it was raining and it might have even been a storm at that day. And on the way home, I had just casually asked him, not really expecting a super crazy story, but I asked him how he found yoga and decided to start his own company, Yoga on the Beach. And the story I got from Jonathan, it was incredible. We sat at his place in the car for, I don't know, at least an additional half an hour. And as he was telling me his journey of sort of being angry at the world and partying too much and getting in with the wrong people and doing the wrong types of things and how his body was feeling and how his mind was feeling. And it was just a stark contrast to the point where I was shook, in a sense, of who this person that I'd known now for a couple of years versus the person he was describing. And I just could not put it all together. And as I came up with the idea for this podcast, he's one of the first people that popped in my mind because his journey to find himself, his journey to his practice, and the journey that he really takes every single day like we all do, it always inspires me. I'm so proud of him for finding this. I'm so proud of him for doing the heavy lifting and the work on himself that he had to do to get to the point where he is now, to get to this point where he travels and he does what makes his heart and his mind feel good. And those are his focus areas. And the change from the person he describes at the beginning to the person that I know, it's very inspiring to me. And I feel like this is something that doesn't come easy. And we'll get into Jonathan's story today. But for all of us, I know my journey is ongoing, but getting to where I am mentally, physically, emotionally has not been easy. There's been a lot of challenges. There's been a lot of ups and downs, and it doesn't always come the same way for some people. I've been, for example, practicing yoga since probably 2014 regularly, and my New Year's resolution one year, 2017, I think it was, or 2016 maybe, was to actually get out of practicing yoga from my computer and get into a studio around other people, which was something that I was always super anxious about doing. Why was I super anxious about it? Well, you see people that practice yoga, they're in phenomenal shape. The things that they can do and the control they have over their body, I have nowhere near that amount of control. And one of the things that I wanted to do was challenge myself that year to build healthy structures and healthy habits that were going to make my mind feel good, make my heart feel better. That's how I ended up in Jonathan's yoga class. And a few months after starting at the gym, he came back from his trip, and that was when he and I met. And I guess the journey I was taking at the time to find inner peace, to overcome anxieties of maybe I'm not doing this yoga position properly, or maybe I can't do a crow pose, which to this day I can barely do, and I've been practicing for 7 years, and get past all that. And one of the things Jonathan was able to do was help me get past some of that, help me improve my practice, help me go beyond the yoga practice or the movements and get into sound healing, get into a whole different mental state that when I am practicing yoga, I'm not just focused on, am I doing this move right, and giving myself anxiety. I'm just focused on my breathing. I'm focusing on improving, holding it longer, hitting that crow pose for the first time, even if it's a few seconds. And this was all because of the environment that he created and the person that he's become. And his journey hasn't been easy, and we're going to talk about that. But it was perseverance and the fact that he shares his story so openly and so transparently. And it's the fact that he was able to find his inner peace, overcome these demons, learn what brought him joy and what brought him peace. And this journey, I hope you all find inspiring the way it's inspired me. And I've lived through it, so I don't expect it to be exactly the same. But I know we all have these journeys, and they're not all the same. And it's a journey to find out who you are. It's a journey to find out what brings you peace. It's a journey to find out what lights up your mind and fulfills your heart. Jonathan sharing his story, I hope today, is going to be helpful for all of you. And in his journey, I hope you find the light that he found, and you find a journey of your own that's going to help you be the best version of yourself. And we'll get with Jonathan right about now, and he's going to share some of his best practices. We're going to talk about the old Jonathan, which seems completely impossible to me, his transition to become the person he is today, the challenges he faces every day, the challenges he faced starting a yoga practice right before COVID. And we'll get into all of the challenges that he's had to face. I hope you find some of them relatable. I know I find a lot of them relatable. And remember that whatever your journey is, it's okay. It's okay to take this journey. All you need to do is focus on what lights up your mind, what fills your heart, what brings you joy, and what brings you peace. So I hope you find this conversation with my personal friend inspiring, and I hope that you enjoy it. Without further ado, let's get to it. Today, our guest is a friend of mine, Jonathan Villacres. I met Jonathan, and this may sound kind of bro-y, but I met Jonathan at the gym, but it was in a hot yoga class that he used to teach on Tuesday evenings locally here. I would always make class a priority because of his energy. He's genuine. He was pure. We connected pretty quickly in class and communicating after class. He's always gone out of his way to share positive vibes and be transparent about days when he struggled or when he had a good day and utilize that energy into class. So we became friends. We hung out. It was pretty evident. He is this person. He is a transparent but positive energy. And I really appreciate having you as a friend, having you on the show. And it wasn't always easy, so we're going to dive into that today. So without further ado, he's my friend, fellow yogi, a teacher, practitioner, sound healer, creator, and founder of Yoga on the Beach. This is Jonathan. Hey, man, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm super stoked to be here.
How are you feeling today?
Well, I guess since you told everybody how genuine I am, I'll just say something real. I feel a little nervous.
I know. No.
So, just gonna kind of let it roll and see how everything flows.
That's perfect. You should just relax. It's just you and I right now. It's like not till a little later everyone else gets to listen. So welcome to the show. I'm glad you took the time to come on. I really wanted to have you on because of all the things that I said a minute ago, but also because I feel like you have such a cool story and it's so relatable and human. And I can't wait to get into that today. But before we get into that, I want to start with my small talk question of the day. It's I love irony. I feel like I'm a walking piece of irony. And therefore, we're going to start with this question. You were camping last week. I'm wondering where you went and how was the weather?
So I went to Sugar River Forest Preserve. It's in Durand, Illinois. It's actually pretty close. The weather, so there's two parts of this question. The first night it thunderstormed on us, and it basically was the weather was so bad that our tent almost flew away. And then, yeah, it was pretty intense. We had to weigh everything down and put everything inside of the tent and in every corner so that it was like really like a solid foundation. But then the next day it was like Durand, Illinois.
So that's south, right?
I believe it's north.
Oh, okay. Oh, so we had all those storms. That was last week. Yeah, that was pretty scary.
Yeah. But the next day it was
okay.
like 90 degrees and it was beautiful. I slacklined, I went swimming.
Nice.
So, typical Midwest weather.
Very nice. Yeah, that was kind of how it is in Chicago, right? Just one day you have snow, one day you're nice out, one day it's tornadoes, next day it's 90.
Yep. Yeah.
Cool. All right. Today it's hot too, or it's not as hot as it's been, but today I was outside walking the dog a little earlier, sweating a little, which is, I guess, normal for me, but it's been a warm couple weeks here in general.
I've been loving it, man. I'm not even gonna say that I don't like it. I love when it's hot.
I hear you. All right, let's do the lightning round question. So I'm just going to ask you the question. These are fun, and you just say the first thing that comes to your mind.
Sounds good.
Cool.
I'm ready.
Awesome. All right, this first one, I'm also a troll a little bit. So, do you ever post inspirational quotes on social media?
Yes.
What's your favorite ice cream flavor?
Probably strawberry.
Okay. What does a person need to be happy?
Love.
Is there such a thing as objective beauty?
I think everybody's beautiful in some way or another.
That's a good answer. Have you ever slapped someone in the face?
Ooh, you're going to get me canceled as a yoga instructor. In my, before I practice yoga, yes. Sometimes, I accidentally slap myself in the face in the situations that I put myself in a very metaphorical way.
We're going to get into that too. What's your favorite type of muffin?
Blueberry with walnuts.
Oh, that sounds good, actually. I'm kind of hungry. Have you ever tasted soap?
I have, yes. I grew up with my parents finding very creative ways to discipline me if I was out of line. So.
Oh, dude, seriously, me too. I called a kid a butthead one time and got a nice tablespoon of Dawn in my mouth.
I had a pretty bad mouth when I was a kid, so it was probably merited.
Makes sense.
Not saying that anybody should put soap in their kids' mouths, but it works.
Yeah, speaking of getting canceled, you're making those recommendations now. Are you a dog person?
I love dogs, absolutely, 100%.
Dark chocolate or milk chocolate?
Dark.
What's your favorite movie?
It's a tie between The Lord of the Rings and Star Wars.
I did not see that coming. That's cool. I like that. Speaking of cool, say something cool.
Oh, I am not the king of cool.
Could revert back
I got
to
nothing for you.
quote.
Oh my God. I guess one of my favorite quotes, and it's kind of a cheesy one. It's the Gandhi quote, and it's to be the change you wish to see in the world.
That's my favorite.
I don't know if it's cool, but it's one of those things that I try to live by. It's one of those quotes that I try to remember when I'm in like a stressful situation.
I absolutely love that. That's my all-time favorite quote, actually. So
Oh,
appreciate
great.
that. Yeah. What's your favorite age so far?
Definitely my 30s.
And then my last question here for a lightning round is, and I'm genuinely curious about this one, what's your favorite type of yoga?
I like to practice the way that I like to teach, with a blend of a couple different styles. I feel that I like something more grounded, and I kind of get that a lot with yin and ashtanga yoga.
Do you want to take just like a second and give like a 1 or 2 sentence summary of the differences between them, or how you would describe each one of those?
Yeah, so yin yoga is more restorative. It's more of you letting go and sort of letting gravity take you in the posture, where Ashtanga is more active and heated. You get like the classic warriors, you get the balances, and then Kundalini is more of a breathwork type practice. There's a lot of natural drugs that release in your body, like DMT. So it kind of takes you to a really like head sort of journey.
Okay. Now,
Yeah.
do you have to get certified separately in each one, or is it like a massive certification where you learn a bunch of different styles?
Yeah, no, they're all separate. And there's so many different types of yoga. And there's definitely some things that you can get away with by just taking like a little training, not necessarily a full certification. But with specific types of yoga, like Ashtanga, there's definitely a specific training behind that. Same thing with Kundalini. I think most of the people in the United States that take yoga teacher trainings, they're mostly vinyasa teacher trainings. Vinyasa is sort of the Western way of practicing yoga, where it's a little bit more physical based and more sort of flow based.
Yeah. And ironically, that's the class that you used to teach that I would go to.
Yeah, those are the popular ones. Ironically, I don't really teach very much vinyasa anymore. I teach more of a blend of like Ashtanga and Yin.
Well, that's a great segue to go into my first question. Tell us about you. Who are you? Where'd you grow up? How'd you get here?
Yeah, well, I got here in a really interesting way. My father was from Ecuador. He was an immigrant that basically came here the right way, which means that he had his papers before he got here. So when he came to the United States, he was a resident, and my mother is Puerto Rican. So both of my parents were not from Chicago, but they met in Chicago, which is where I'm from. I was born on the north side of Chicago. I was raised in Albany Park. And I went through the whole like Chicago public school system, Chicago public parks. So I've been really in Chicago for a good majority of my life.
Very nice. And did you ever leave, or if you did leave, where to?
Yeah. So I try to move. I think that's kind of the story of my life, is that I'm always trying to leave Chicago. It's a big city. It's a beautiful city. There's a lot of really great people here. The food is absolutely incredible. But these summers, man, not the summers, but the winters they beat me up.
Well, you pay for your 3 nice months of summer. You pay for them for 9 months.
Yeah. And, being that my parents are from these different parts of the world, Ecuador is very mountainous, and there's also the jungle, the Amazon jungle is connected to Ecuador, and Ecuador also has really beautiful coasts, beaches. So I have this like island blood in me, and the winters, you would think that's because I've lived here my whole life that it would be a little bit easier every winter. And the older that I'm getting, it's actually the opposite. The harder it's becoming for me. So to answer your previous question is, yes, I've tried to move out of Chicago many, many times. One of the first times that I moved out of Chicago, I moved to Tennessee. that was not a very supportive place
I didn't even know
for
about
myself.
Tennessee.
Yeah, I don't really talk about it much. It was kind of
Okay.
it was a weird point in my life. I just
What?
wanted to be around mountains more and just be in
Okay.
warmer climate.
So what
I
about
believe
Tennessee was like, that's where I'm going to go.
um, I I was dating somebody and she was moving to Tennessee, and I just looked at it as an opportunity to kind of start over. And
Makes sense.
it was really difficult. I experienced a lot of racism in Tennessee,
Oh, wow.
and it was just something that it just didn't feel supportive. So I came back to Chicago,
What
and then a
type
few
of
years.
what type of racism, if you don't mind me asking? You don't have to answer that if you don't want to, but was it just verbal or hate crimes? Like what type of racism were you experiencing?
It's usually verbal. Yeah.
Okay.
It's always about the color of my skin. So, it's something that as a Latin American, being Latino, and having darker skin, it's always sort of been something that I would experience when I would go in less urban places.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'm sorry to hear
unfortunate,
that.
but yeah, it's unfortunate, but that's just not giving people an excuse for how they are. But we have a history of that here in the United States, and it's still very, very apparent. It's still very much going on. And I think it's important for people to be aware of that
Yeah.
people of color still, still don't have places in the United States where they can feel safe.
I think that's very, very humbling to hear, but it is hard too because you have this happening every day to people like you who are just going about your day and living your life. And then you have, you know, Amazon saying Black Lives Matter, but have incredibly like racist policies. And you have all of these things in the public or on, like billboards, I like to say, like you can put it on a billboard and then everybody sees it. That doesn't make it true. So like putting end racism on a billboard doesn't make it just happen. It just makes people feel better about it or feel like they're able to ignore it. So I think it's awful that we have these situations where people like you are just having to live a life where you never really know when that's going to come.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, America has a history of oppression towards people of color. Um, and it's easy for companies like Amazon to say like Black Lives Matter because it looks good for them. And it sort of like makes them feel like their hands are clean.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. It's putting the lipstick on a pig montage. So that's great. I appreciate you sharing that and, of course, being vulnerable there. But I'm curious, and I'm leading the witness a little bit because we've talked about this, but tell me what Jonathan was like in like high school and where'd you go to school? Where'd you end up working early on in your career?
Yeah, there's probably going to be a lot of people that I went to high school watching this, and they could probably safely say that I was sort of a class clown. I talked a lot. I think a big part, and I don't want to make this whole thing about about the color of my skin growing up, but I've never been a very large stature person. I was always kind of like the skinny short kid in school. So I used my mouth a lot to like really fight my battles. So I definitely did not hold back to say anything. And a lot of times it was rude and unkind. I wasn't a malicious kid, but I was definitely a defensive teenager. But yeah, I grew up right here in Chicago. So I went to Von Steuben Metropolitan High School. And it was like 2 blocks away from my house. And all of my teachers actually parked right next to the house that I grew up in. So they all knew that I lived a block away, which made no excuse that I was late every day to class, which also got me in a lot of trouble. So, I
I
wasn't
wonder
like
if
the
any of
bad
your
kid.
teachers are listening.
They might. I'm still friends with some of them. So, which is really interesting because some of them I was just I was just horrible too. And you grow up, you live, you learn, and you really start to do the things like working on your shadow and sort of stepping into your highest self and becoming a better person, and not just for other people or society, but really for yourself. And that sort of reflects brighter when you're able to sort of do the work and look inward and say, okay, well, maybe these things that I'm saying are really hurtful, and why am I saying these things, and how can I grow from that?
That's 100% true. And I think before we go any further, I do want to dive. So I heard you mention the shadow. I know what that is, but your shadow self is basically like the worst parts of you that are, inside, right? Is that your definition? Or if you wanted to elaborate on what you mean by your shadow self?
Yeah, I think in yogic terms, at least, you have the sun and the moon, right? You have these polar opposites. You have the masculine, the divine masculine energy. You have the divine feminine energy. You have hot, cold. You have night, day. You have negative, positive. And I believe that a lot of what is taught here in the United States is positivity, right? Is the light. And I personally feel that that can be somewhat toxic if we're just looking at the bright things, right?
Right.
Because how can you distinguish if you're right or wrong if you're never really looking at the wrongs that you're doing? And so it's a lot like this, right? You go outside right now on this beautiful summer day, which, by the way, the solstice was on Tuesday. So now we're actually in summer.
Yeah.
So on these beautiful bright days where the sun is out, you have the sun touching your skin. You can see it, you can feel it. But what you don't see is what's behind you. You don't see that shadow that you're casting. So in yoga, that's the shadow work. Those are the things about yourself that you don't necessarily see unless you stop and take a minute and look at those things.
Right. And did you have a defining moment where you were like, oh, I have a shadow that I didn't know or that I didn't understand? Or was that something you just kind of learned over time?
Oh, this is an everyday growing process.
Same.
Yeah. I've definitely had epiphanies in my life, very specific ones, that have woken up a conversation in myself about, just about my own personal growth. I think a lot of that happened in my 20s, especially just making really bad decisions. A lot of those decisions based around partying and maybe staying up all night to party and then having to go to work in early and, things like that.
And where did you work? Were you in financial or I can't remember exactly.
Yeah, so I've had tons of jobs in my life. My very first job ever was a lifeguard for the Chicago Park District. And I lifeguarded and I taught people how to swim for like the first 5 or 6 years of me being able to work. And then I went away to college. And then when I came back, I didn't really want to lifeguard anymore. I wanted to do something more like corporate because that's what I believed people did when they were grown-ups, is that they went and they got a corporate job.
They sell us.
Yeah. So to answer your question about finances, I wasn't like a financial advisor or anything, but I did work at a bank. Not a special job. It was just a full-time teller position. And, they gave us at the time what I thought were good benefits. And, we got paid vacation and sort of all the things that you need to sort of be stuck in a system of 40 hours a week, 9 to 5. Do what the guy up top tells you, type thing.
So you were partying a lot. Your shadow self was behind you during these times, and you weren't obviously loving your corporate job. What was your epiphany, or what was your transition point when you were just like, I've got to make some changes?
Yeah. It was sort of like a combination of a few things. It was definitely me being young and sort of not really understanding what I wanted to do with my life, or really visualizing or feeling or seeing my worth. So I think a lot of my early 20s, I was chasing money, chasing significant others, and really paying attention to things that were external other than myself. And that started to, my social life started to creep into my like professional life. And yeah, I was partying a lot. I was drinking a lot. I was doing a lot of drugs. And, I remember this was like the defining moment as, I had stayed up like to like 4 a.m, and the person that I was dating at the time was not very happy that I was out partying, and I guess I didn't like call her, something of that matter. And I remember waking up just like feeling like, God, why do I keep doing this? And I was working at the bank at the time, and it was a summer day, and I had a full suit and tie on, and I walked outside, and it was like 90 degrees, and it was on a Sunday. I was actually, believe it or not, there are banks that are open on Sundays. There are not a lot of them, but the one that I worked at happened to be open on Sundays. And I walked outside, and I remember thinking that, like, I felt horrible from just the party of the night that I had before. I felt horrible about, just the manner of the relationship that I was in. And then I was walking outside on a beautiful 90-degree day, sweating just from walking from my house to my car. And I turned my car on, and I just broke down in tears. And I remember my face was so swollen because I was crying so much. And it probably also had to do with all the alcohol that I drank the night before that I probably still smelled like. And I called in sick, and I told him that I wasn't going to come in. And a day after that, I went on vacation. And when I came back from vacation, they fired me.
Oh my gosh.
And then about a week later, the girl broke up with me.
The pile on.
Yeah. And at that time, I didn't really know how to deal with my feelings constructively. So can you guess what I did after that?
I would imagine you partied.
I partied. That's exactly what I did. Yeah. And I got myself in a really, really, really horrible, dumb situation. Hopefully this doesn't get me canceled. Hopefully people are able to relate to this.
I think it's relatable. It's very relatable.
So I went to this party, and I was just really sad, and I was just, it was just whatever people had. Hey, you want some of this? Yeah, sure, I'll try it. And it was about 5 a.m, and I wanted to get back home before the sun came up. So I got in a car, and I started driving, and my car spun out of control. And thank the divine that there was nobody or nothing in the way. But when that car spun, my whole life just flashed in front of my face. And, I didn't hit anybody. Nothing happened other than this car spinning out of control. I pulled the car over. I took the keys out of the ignition. I walked the rest of my way home, and I told myself that if I wasn't sure who I was reaching out to at that time, but I guess what many people would call God is what I started to reach out to. People could also maybe consider it as praying. And that's what I did. And I asked for a second chance. And I asked that if I was given a second chance, that I would do something more meaningful with my life. And about a week or two later, I enrolled back into college so that I could finish school. And in my very last semester in college, I took a yoga course. And it was that course that really, really changed my life.
And that was through school. Was it like an elective?
It was an elective, yeah.
Okay.
So when I decided to go back to school, I had already had 2 years of community college underneath my belt.
Hmm.
So when I went to a university, which I went to Northeastern Illinois University, I took courses in film and theater and communication, and that was kind of what my degree was on. So the last semester, I had like all these open slots for electives, and I was like, well, I kind of need something that's like a little light on my mind and a little bit beneficial for my physical body. And at the time, I was like, oh, I'm going to meet a lot of cool girls, so like I'm going to take yoga. And the funny part about taking the course is like it was mostly guys that also thought there was going to be a bunch of girls in the class taking yoga.
Didn't work out exactly as you all planned.
And what turned out to be what was supposed to be this like easy, fun class turned out to be one of the most eye-opening, shadow working, anything that I've ever done in my life.
That's amazing. And after taking that course, what was your next step? Were you convinced that that was what you were supposed to do, or did you just practice more? And how'd you find that?
Yeah, so I'm a firm believer that everything happens for a reason. And if you listen to those reasons, things come around full circle. Remember that car that I told you about that I like parked and I like got out of?
Yeah.
I sold it. And I told myself that I was never going to drive again until I fixed my addiction problems. So I sold the car and I purchased a yoga teacher training.
Wow.
I don't really like to tell people where I got my teacher training from.
You don't have to, but I remember you telling me that exact same thing like 5 years ago or something.
To be honest, the facilitators were amazing. They were really, really great people, and they were really strong at holding space, and they were really good at teaching the inner workings of yoga. But I took my teacher training at a very corporate yoga studio. I won't say which one, but if you could think of the most corporate yoga studio in the United States, that's the one.
Yeah.
Corporate.
They've also decided never to sponsor the show after this.
That's good. I know of a yoga studio that might want to sponsor the show. Well, we need to give it a few years for it to develop.
Yeah, exactly. So that's awesome. And then you went through training, you became certified. What was your next move? Were you doing this as a side hustle? Were you back in corporate America at all? I didn't even ask you that. Or did you just put it all in and go all in with school and your training?
Yeah, so I went completely in on after I took that yoga course in college. I made a firm decision that I was going to sell my car, and with the money, I was going to take as many courses as possible to learn how to teach yoga effectively. And I also used that money to travel a little bit because I didn't just want to, from the very beginning, I didn't just want to learn from this one institution. I knew that I was taking a corporate yoga teacher training, and I knew that it was going to be very limited in the inner workings of what yoga actually is, specifically Patanjali's 8-limb yogic path. I knew that that was going to be a little esoteric for the company that I was learning from. And the irony is the company that I was learning from that eventually hired me is a corporate yoga studio. So I didn't necessarily leave corporate to not work in corporate again. However, at first it didn't feel like corporate. When I first got trained, it wasn't corporate yet. And then once I got hired, within that process of me taking the teacher training and then getting hired, the company had flipped over to corporate. So, and it's funny because it's a yoga studio, but it had like the same sort of corporate values, like the sort of see more, sell more, like this
corporate
is the corporate five.
Corporate America has a way of infiltrating into everything we do.
Well, it's a system, it's a system to keep us controlled. It's a system to make us feel like we don't have any options. And
Yeah.
if we leave, we lose that sense of security. And that's actually what this yoga studio did. We were almost threatened, like, well, if you don't want to teach this class, we have like 3,000 other people that are just waiting in line to teach at our corporate yoga studio. So I got to the point where I was overworked and I was teaching so much, and I felt like I was very replaceable. In fact, that was kind of like a big thing, that they would make you feel replaceable.
Right.
So I left.
Good for you. And then
Yeah.
I think there was probably something in between, but you started, and you can elaborate on that. You started Yoga on the Beach, which was Chicago, now Yoga on the Beach Company. You started that 2019? Was that somewhere around
2018. It was the summer of 2018. Yeah.
How did you decide to do that, and what was your vision?
Yeah. So right as I decided that I was going to quit teaching for corporate yoga, this actually goes back to the question that you asked earlier. Have I ever left Chicago? And this comes to the first time that I actually tried to leave and like sell everything that I had. So in 2018, at this time, my father had moved back to Ecuador, and he was living in Ecuador at that time for a few years, and I hadn't seen him in maybe like 2 years. And just something was calling me. Something was telling me that I had to go to Ecuador and like not just live with my dad, but also to explore, to sort of be a little nomadic, and to reconnect with my family. So when I quit working at this corporate yoga studio, I literally sold everything that I had. I had like a 300-piece record collection that I sold, and I was able to make a decent amount of money to support my stay in Ecuador. And I moved there, and the idea was that I was going to take this practice that Westerners have sort of, I don't want to say robbed, maybe adopted is a nicer word.
Maybe corporatized is a nicer
corporatized.
word.
I think that's the perfect word. And I wanted to make it accessible. I wanted to make it affordable. And especially living in Chicago, even at that time, it was really difficult for me to practice yoga, because you go to any yoga studio, you're paying like $25 to $30 on a class. Yeah. So for me, when I went to Ecuador, the idea was that I was just going to teach free classes in the park. And if anybody wanted to donate money to me while I taught these classes, cool. If not, I was just going to keep showing up at this park once a week and teach. Now, this was the most frightening thing that I've ever done in my life. When I moved to Ecuador, my Spanish was pretty terrible. So I'm teaching in a Spanish-speaking country and very, very broke Spanish. And, people are just being kind and coming and like, oh my God, thank you. That was great. But realistically, I knew that there were holes in the way that I was teaching. Mm-hmm. And, there was a lot of challenges with moving to another country. I didn't really quite have a plan. I just thought that, trust the universe. And the universe basically guided me back to Chicago. And when I got back to Chicago, which is around the time that I met you, when I got back to Chicago,
had just moved back when we met.
I just moved back, yeah. And I reached out to all these other places to see if I could teach yoga classes there. But in addition to that, I still wanted to offer donation-based public classes, but I wanted to do it my way. I wanted to do it with nobody telling me how to teach or nobody coaching me. Mm-hmm. And that's how Yoga on the Beach started.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I remember you starting, you were just doing summertime classes. Was it Oak Street? Or I forget which beach it was on, but yeah, you were doing those classes. Mm-hmm. I think it was like every Saturday. It was, and Sunday maybe. It was really cool.
So yeah, the initial the first year of yoga on the beach, it was Saturdays and Sundays. I can't remember the times. They were both at different times. I was still pretty new at figuring out how to schedule.
I remember that.
They were too early for most people. And I think right away we kind of figured out what works for people. I think one of the times was like 7 a.m. on a Sunday, and like nobody came to those classes. Yeah. Yeah. So it started with just on the weekends where I was actually doing 2 classes. It was like 2 classes every Saturday and Sunday morning. And then the following year, it was like every single day we were offering like 2 to 3 classes a day.
Yeah.
I found out right away that was not the way to do it. So, it was a very much trial by error. And, I figured out a lot in the first year or two and creating the business.
And then COVID hit, right? And I remember talking to you, and like the other people in that virtual class was the most non-work socializing I would get those first few months. So how did COVID and the lockdowns and the uncertainty impact your business and even you, more importantly, you?
Yeah, I think like everybody, there were major processes that were happening during COVID. The biggest change that happened is that every single yoga studio that I worked at fired me. Everyone. And I remember the place that you and I met at was actually not a yoga studio. We met at a gym, or a club is what they called it. And I remember that they fired everybody. And when they fired everyone, just like anybody that was losing their job, I kind of had a moment of panic.
Oh, yeah.
And you remember this, the classes that I had were, they were just gigantic.
You would have to turn people away. I would text you if I wasn't going to be 15 minutes early and be like, hey, can you put a mat down for me?
Yeah. And, putting the ego to the side and just kind of talking about facts. I think I was averaging like 50 to 70 people in one class a week. And I taught both the Monday and the Tuesday night class. And I remember that there were so many people that were coming to this class that the actual CEO of the company was watching through the window and like wondering like, what is this guy doing? What is he doing to get this many people in the class? And so I used that as kind of like leverage, right?
Yeah,
right when
have.
I think it was like a week or 2 after they let everybody off, I called the club and I asked to speak to the supervisor that ran all the class programming. And I begged her not to fire me. I was like, look, this means everything to me. And I'm like, as your instructor that's bringing in the highest attendance, I'm like, why don't we work together? Why don't you keep me as your lead instructor and I can help you rebuild this yoga program?
Right.
You know what she did? She laughed in my face and she told me, she's like, dude, trust me, I have tons of instructors that are just begging to come back. So,
dude, I can tell you as someone who went to those classes before you taught them, the Monday one had, and I loved the teacher. She was amazing, but they had maybe 7, 8, maybe 10 sometimes. And the Tuesday class was a little better, but you more than doubled that one too.
Yeah, I remember at the very end, thank you for saying such nice things. I remember that one of the last classes that I taught there, which probably, looking back now, it was probably a super spreader. I remember I broke the record for the attendance of any class that had ever been in that room.
Wow.
And actually, the supervisor, the one that like fired me and laughed in my face when I begged for my job back, she held the record, and she had been teaching that same class for like 10 years. And she was like, kind of like, oh, well, let's see if you can keep doing it, kind of like thing. And, but you know, like I said, everything happens for a reason. After that, you know, the whole lockdown happened, and then I was in the online thing for a while. And I realized right away that the online thing just didn't work for me. You know, I feel really awkward in front of a camera. So for those that are watching, you know, like,
we can tell.
This is something that's
kidding.
really uncomfortable. This is something that's really uncomfortable, you know, and it's something that I do these things that are uncomfortable to challenge myself so that I can grow. And that was a big reason why I decided to do the online stuff. And, you know, everybody was doing it. And I was like, well, you know, I have to keep offering people something. And it was also my way of still having some type of normalcy. And I realized right away that it wasn't for me, and that I didn't want to be in front of a camera, that I wanted to be outside. So what was nice about
and the beaches were closed, so you didn't even have that option. They locked us all.
Everything was closed. Yeah. Well, also it was March when all that happened, so it was so cold outside.
Yeah.
But by the time May came around, you know, it was warm enough to be outside, and that actually helped my business. That was the first summer that people were coming to my classes, and you know, we were social distancing. Oh, yeah. But I remember the first iteration of yoga on the beach during COVID was we were actually doing it in a park. And we were all like super spread out, and we were doing it in the park. And then I found Montrose Harbor, and Montrose Harbor was actually open, and they were letting people go to the harbor. So what I was doing is I was teaching 2 classes, or I think I was teaching maybe 3 or 4 classes a week. I can't remember. But it was great because I had already started this little following. And by the time outdoor stuff started opening up again, tons of people were coming to the classes. And it went from maybe 1 to 5 people coming to the last like month, there was like 30 to 50 people. Oh, wow. And yeah, and it was one of the happiest moments of not just being a business owner, but of my life. Just, you know, going from this really, really, really low, where this corporate company was like, we don't need you, get out of here, like laughing in my face when I'm begging for the classes back. And then now, you know, really believing in myself and being consistent in my offering, and then having all these people come back. And then this comes back to things coming around full circle. Guess who called me asking me to come back after she saw the success of what I was doing?
I wonder who it could have been. And I guess I had a question I was gonna ask, and we don't. But if you could say one thing to this person now, what would it be?
You know, it wouldn't be anything mean or malicious. It would be that I wish her well, and I hope that she's able to live a life of love and a life of abundance. Because we all deserve that, you know. And I think a lot of times when we make shitty decisions, we make those decisions specifically when it comes to maybe hurting other people. I think a lot of people do that out of fear. There's definitely a selfishness behind it, where it's like, it's either me or you, and it's not going to be me, so then it's you type thinking. Right. So, you know, and I shouldn't say she, I'm just going to say they. I think that at the end of the day, they will always do what they need to do to protect themselves and to live a peaceful life. And as human beings, we all do that. I do like to practice what I preach. practicing what I preach is something that's really important. And one of the yamas in yoga, one of the first limbs of Patanjali's 8 limb is ahimsa, and ahimsa means non-harming. So whether that's physical violence or whether that's verbal violence, I think it's important to stay loving and move from the heart space.
Yeah. How do you keep yourself motivated? Like you've had ups and downs. You're very comfortable talking about them, very authentic about it. Even starting, any class, you will share your mood and what you're basing today's practice on, and how you you would say, write the class. How I wrote this class was I was feeling this way and I wanted to accomplish this and I want to share it with you. How do you stay motivated to be positive, to continue to have these impacts on people's life when life sucks sometimes?
I think that a big part of motivation for myself is that this is what I have to do to survive. Teaching yoga is not just a hobby of mine. It's not just a job of mine. It is 100% a lifestyle. When I took that yoga course, it completely changed my life. It made me stop looking at the world as why me and why are these people doing this to me. I stopped looking at it very selfishly, and I started to look at it as, okay, what am I doing?
Right.
Why am I putting myself in these situations that are harmful for me? And once I started to unpeel those layers and I started to really look inward and understand why I make decisions the way I make them, why I project onto people when I'm upset or when I'm frustrated. Once I really started to pinpoint those character flaws, that's when I was really able to grow from there. And in growing, there's we get these sort of internal rewards when we accomplish something. And for me personally, I like to share that with people because I'm not any more special than you or anybody else. I was given the privilege of being able to study these tools that have helped me develop into a more thoughtful person. And anybody can do that. Anybody can do that.
And I love the way you say you were privileged to have this opportunity, where I feel like old Jonathan would have found a reason that this opportunity wasn't the right one or it wasn't fair. So that's
and
such a growth to hear.
I appreciate you saying that. And I think even when I was taking my first yoga teacher training, I wasn't, I was still that kid that was trying to make my wrongs right. I was that kid that 6 months ago I spun my car out of control, so I was still in that mindset. I remember thinking that first off, I was the only brown male.
Wow.
I wasn't the only Hispanic person there. There was another person who was Hispanic. She was someone that we weren't super close, but we definitely kind of shared this you too type thing. But there was this fear that was like, they're just gonna hire the cute blonde girl.
Right.
Because that's kind of what the
brand.
That was kind of
brand.
like the brand, yeah. Right? Yeah. It was like the Lululemon, and I tried to become a Lululemon ambassador. They don't want me, Nick. I tried over and over and over again.
We need them to do an exclusive line for yoga on the beach.
Yeah. And can you make the shorts just a little bit shorter, for guys that are 5'6" and under? We exist, okay? We have feelings too.
we need to be better represented in the population.
Yeah. So there was definitely that fear that they weren't going to hire me because I didn't look like the typical person that shops at Lululemon. Which, to my surprise, they hired me right away. And then I was like, God, I have got to stop using this like idea of what I think people see me as a crutch. I have to stop
Yeah.
making excuses. And that was a big turn, to know that, like, wait, I have this really good opportunity not to just complain and talk shit, but to really show people that, like, yo, you could be an inner city Puerto Rican kid from Chicago and like teach about wellness, It
Yeah.
doesn't make you a sissy. It doesn't make you, this whatever toxic sort of conversations that are had in
Right.
our communities about men expressing how they feel, because that's something that living in the city, I was bullied
Yeah.
for being too feminine, and it's like
I get
we,
that too.
you know, and I mean, scientifically, we have male chromosomes, we have female chromosomes, and in yoga, you have the divine masculine, which is represented by the sun, and then you have the divine feminine that's represented by the moon. And we all know that the sun and the moon cannot exist without each other. They need each other. They rely on each other's magnetic pulls to revolve, to be a
Yes.
system. And it's the same with us. We have
I love that.
these divine pulls in us that are just dying to be represented. And it's unfair to ourselves and it's unfair to society to have this sort of toxic way of thinking about what it is to be a man or what it is to be a woman. So quick little plug, yoga on the beach is all about diversity, and we do not care what color you are. We do not care what you identify with. All I care about is if you're open to receive the love and the time that I'm donating.
Yeah. And I can attest the community there is unbelievable. I mean, I just remember when we would practice outside and everyone would just be conversing and even at the gym previously. So I can attest to that. And thank you I mean, you were very, very open. And it's funny because like I told you, I had like a handful of questions that I wanted to ask and it all happened super organically. Which is even better. So thank you for being so open. And before we head out, I'm going to give you an opportunity to ask me a couple questions or a question if you have any. And the floor is yours. Be nice.
Yeah.
I'm nervous because you
Yeah.
actually know me a little bit. So it's,
Yeah, no, because I know you, which by the way, it's really, really beautiful to see this genuinely kind, loving human, you, get the recognition that I feel like you deserved. I feel like I think you were, and of course you can tell me if you weren't or not, but I feel like you were pretty accurately represented for the most part.
yeah, I mean, I know everything's going to have editing. There's going to be people that get involved on, from Love is Blind production and all that stuff. But I always say I'm like unapologetically myself. And so I went into this and I was thinking, cause I'm not a big reality TV person at all. And so for me, it was kind of like, is this something I want to do? Is this something? And I'm like, you know what? I very rarely, and again, a lot of shadow work myself over the years because I used to have a mouth that would get me into trouble. And I'm still very sarcastic. So it's hard for me to not be sarcastic. And I'm very direct as well. So I can basically say, here's what I think in a sentence. And if someone doesn't want to hear it, it can be hard. And sometimes it's not the right thing to do. But that being said, like I stand by my integrity and who I am. And so I figured if I go on, there isn't going to be anything to edit out of whack. There isn't going to be any way to manipulate me into doing something that I don't want to do or that I wouldn't do, minus all of the cameras. So I do feel like for the most part, I was accurately represented. I know we've talked about this before. Like I get a rep online, which I don't really pay too much attention really at all to what people say online. Cause I'm confident in myself. I don't care what other people think. If you don't like me or you think this or think that, cool. You think that, I'm fine with it. And the whole gossiping thing is ludicrous because, and again, this is just people on the internet. I don't know that I was even necessarily decided that in some sort of production meeting. But for me, it was always be yourself, be authentic, be caring, and don't give up who you are. And if you stay true to who you are, there's not going to be anything bad that can happen. And so that was kind of my approach. And I mean, there's always that concern like, oh, I am going to get manipulated, or oh, I am going to be put in a situation I'm uncomfortable in. And you know what? Life gives you situations you're uncomfortable in. And what do? You stay true to yourself. So I felt like there wasn't going to be too much that they could do that would misrepresent me. There was a little, obviously the gossip thing a little bit, but I don't gossip. I honestly I don't really care that much about other people I shouldn't say that. Edit that out. I care a lot about other people, but I don't really care about other people and their gossip. Like if somebody wants to talk to me or somebody needs a friend, I'm always going to be there. And if it's a stranger, great. If I can, I will. If it's a friend, great. If I can, I will. But ultimately, like if someone comes to me and they want to talk about gossip, I'm not going to stay in that conversation too long. I'd much rather talk about big ideas. I'd much rather talk about someone's personal journey like we've been doing today. And that's just kind of who I am. So I didn't feel like there was a lot they could do with that, but I appreciate you saying those kind words. Like I don't expect anything out of this, but I do appreciate when people say to me, you know, I felt like you were authentic, or people like you that know me to say, like, hey, it was like watching you, but on TV, because that's kind of who I am.
Yeah. What's the biggest, other than like your social media following, what's the biggest thing that has changed? What's the most difficult part about the change?
There's a lot. So one is obviously like getting married in that way. And then having this entire Benjamin Button or extremely accelerated experience to a relationship. It's certainly not easy. And that's the fact that only 4 people in the whole world, 4 couples, 8 people in the whole world have gone through this specific experience. It's kind of isolating, and you feel a little lost in a sense. The other thing is you have this connection that you build, and the timelines are, editing, all that stuff. The timelines are the timelines, but we met and then got married within 7 weeks. And
wow.
That is, I have had relationships start and finish in 7 weeks. I think we all have. I have had people I've dated longer than 7 weeks and, gone on 3 dates. And to have all those decisions, it's like a pressure cooker. So that experience, and then like figuring out life after that, when you're basically scheduled for 7 weeks, your day after day after day, that was really hard to do. And you kind of things settle down, and then show comes out. So now you're also dealing with the entire world watching, commenting, judging, loving your relationship through social media and the deep dark web of Reddit and all of these areas. So you have all of that you have to manage. Then you have the personal side, which is the Instagram followers, people paying a lot more attention to what you're saying, what you're not saying, what you're doing, what you're not doing. That's weird. But when you remove all the noise, like the most weird part that I still haven't gotten used to is getting recognized. When you're out at Target and you're doing your grocery shopping like you've always done, and now people are like, hey, wait, aren't you Nick and Danielle from Love is Blind? oh my God. And then they freak out. But the cool thing is that 99.9% of people are nice in person. They are only mean on the internet. And the excitement that you bring to take a photo, or when someone says the way you two work on your relationship, or the way you work on each, on yourselves individually, or the way you speak about this online, or the way that you are transparent about good days and bad days in your mental health, has really inspired me to feel like I can be transparent about it. And I get goosebumps because, it's silly, but you really make someone's day or change someone's life without really doing anything but taking 10 seconds to say hi, ask them their name, and take a photo. And that to me is the most bizarre thing, because people look at me and I'm still like, what the hell's their problem? And then I'm like, oh, they probably recognize me, or don't know where they recognize you from. But to me, that's been like the biggest difference that is like super hard to adjust to, because we went to the Art Fest a couple weeks ago. We went from one side of it to the other. What is that? Maybe a mile total? No less than 100 people stopped us and asked for photos, and everyone's super nice, but it's just like, holy cow, that's crazy.
That's exhausting, huh?
Yeah. It is, but I don't want people to, feel bad, because it's a big deal, and, it makes their day. So it's worth it. It's worth it to see someone happy. Yeah.
I got two more for you.
Oh, okay. Wow. You came prepared.
Yeah. I haven't seen you in so long, and I know. I've been wanting to actually ask you these questions in person. So it's cool that we get to do it. We can't take back what we say.
Yeah, no, right. It's on video.
We can just edit it out if anything. How has this changed at work?
That's a good question. So, but for those who don't know, I'm in corporate America. I'm a VP of marketing at a software company. I'm naive. I did not think this was a big deal. I told work a few days before they announced the cast. HR was like, well, do you want to tell people or do you not? And I was like, I don't think it's going to be a big deal. And I go the next week, which is the day they announced the cast, or maybe the day after they announced the cast. And I go to my one-on-one with our CEO. We're kind of small. We're like a 230 person company. And he's just like, so I'm watching Netflix and I see the trailer for Love is Blind. Oh my God. Are you kidding me? And then the people started talking about it in a Slack channel, which I didn't know about until later. And almost everyone in the whole company knew. And I had no idea they all knew. And then the day after the show, first few episodes aired, the next work day, I go into a meeting with a person on my team, and the person that reports to her is on her team. And I'm like, is in the Zoom call. I'm like, oh, hey, Steph, what are you doing here? And then this other person was like, her manager was like, I'm going to just let her take over. And she's like, oh my God, I watched Love is Blind this weekend. And I'm like,
oh
okay.
My God.
Okay. So and then I start getting the messages slowly. And then maybe 2 weeks after the finale aired, we're on our company-wide meeting, which we have weekly. And they do we're called flyers. It's guess the flyer. So they put up a couple of fun facts about someone, and then you have to guess who it is. And the person who guesses it wins, right? In the chat or over the thing. And one of the facts has appeared on a reality show. And it wasn't me, because they always tell the person ahead of time to get the fun facts. And then someone guesses it. And our CEO again he's like, oh, so what show are you on? And it was like, I don't even remember what it was, but it was like a minor role in a minor show, like one episode. And then that person was like, I'm not quite the reality star that Nick is, but, and I'm like, I just got ousted to the whole company on that meeting. And then they start talking about, they're like, hey, Nick, can you come on? And what do you have to say about so-and-so and so-and-so? And I'm just like, this is insane. So it's been weird. And then we had a manager meeting a couple weeks ago, and we did people bingo, where there's a fun fact about each person in there, and you have to go find out who's who. And of course, mine went viral on a reality TV show. And so everyone was just like, this is you, right? I'm like, it's me. You've all watched it. So yeah, it's been a little weird, but it's kind of. I feel like I would have said it settled down, but then 2 weeks ago that happened, and then everyone's talking about it again. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's weird.
I'm curious if they treat you any differently.
That was my biggest fear. Is like when I told HR I don't want to tell anyone because I don't want them to think any less of me as like a talent. The only time I think anyone treats me different is if they meet me in person and we go out somewhere and people recognize me. I think and I don't think they're treating me different. I think they're more just like, whoa, shocked by it. Like I went to dinner with the team a couple of months ago, right after it aired, and like we got stopped at the dinner table. I went out with the CEO and his wife and like 2 other people to a place in River North, and one person noticed, and then I took pictures for 15 minutes, and I was like, I'm sorry, I've got to go because you're not going to get to talk to me at all anymore. And it was crazy.
Yeah.
So it's not that they treat me different. I just feel like they're just like, whoa, when you're just trying to be normal.
Yeah.
So
That's really interesting.
It's weird. Next time we hang out, hopefully, I'm not even going to say that. Hopefully it's not in public, or if it is in public, that doesn't happen. But it's
well, I'm not famous by any means, but it's like, there were times where you and I would hang out and someone would recognize me from being in their yoga class and like, oh my God, it's my favorite yoga instructor. And you would be like, oh, everybody knows this guy.
But that's because you built a community. A kula. You built a kula.
A kula, yeah.
Cool.
Hopefully the next time we hang out, it is more private because I like to stay pretty private these days. So
yeah, I hear you.
Or unless it's at Yoga the Beach, then you can bring all your followers with you and go out and do some yoga.
I know, right? Well, with that, why don't you plug your yoga on the beach? I know you've got a retreat coming up. Maybe you want to talk about, or are we going to edit that out? Give us your plugs. Where can people find you? Where can people follow you? Where can people learn more about yoga on the beach?
Yeah. So I'm basically offering 2 donation-based classes every single week for the rest of summer. They will go until the end of September. It's Tuesday nights at 6:30 p.m. For sunset yoga, and then Saturday mornings at 10 a.m. Once a month, every first Saturday of the month, I do this thing called the Get Down on the Beach, which is with my friend Corey's company called the Get Down Chicago. And basically, there's no sign up for any of these classes. They're completely donation based. We'll be there setting up. He comes with like a sound system and a DJ, and we have like a yoga class with some sound healing. And then we have just like a big old open, sober public gathering. I can't call it a party. But
not after today, you can't.
Yeah. And then in addition to that, I do this thing on the new moon. It's called Vibración, and it's yoga and sound healing. And basically, I play a bunch of singing bowls, and I'll have a different sound healer come in. And the thing that I'm most proud of is November 4th through the 10th, I'm leading a yoga retreat at Lake Atitlan, Guatemala, with my partner Shanti. Her and I will be curating a beautiful experience. It's all inclusive, minus the flight. We have a private villa with a private chef that's making 3 meals a day. They're all vegetarian. We have a private hot tub. We have a private steam room. It's actually called a sauna. Tetzmecal is what it's called in Guatemala. We'll also have daily yoga practices and meditations. We'll have sound healings. We'll have private back massages. We have a private boat tour that's taking us to 3 different towns. Yeah, dude, it's going to be really,
I actually
really
might
cool.
need to come to this. I know you've talked about it, but I didn't know that it was so extensive.
Well, what's so dope about it is it's going to be in the middle of nowhere. No one's probably going to be coming up to you like,
right.
You'll totally be able to like center yourself and, eat healthy and practice yoga and immerse yourself in Guatemalan culture, which is, dude, Guatemalan culture is just so beautiful and so colorful and vibrant. And we'll be able to actually integrate in those cultures on this boat tour. But yeah, there'll be a kayak tour that I'll lead everybody on.
That's awesome.
Well, it'll be like half kayak, half paddleboard. It's going to be really cool. That's all on the website, yogaonthebeachcompany.com. You could also follow me on Yoga on the Beach Co. That's the Instagram. And then my personal Instagram is j.villacres, my last name. We'll probably have to write that in the comments. So
don't worry, it's all going to be in the captions. You can just click right below.
Cool. But yeah, and I'll be around all summer until it gets cold, and then I'm taking off again and just sort of living nomadically.
That's awesome. Well, thanks again, Jonathan, for being on the show. I appreciate.
Thank you, Nick.
More than anything, I truly, truly appreciate you being honest and authentic and talking about things that aren't easy to talk about. And I think there's a lot of people that'll resonate that. If you enjoyed this conversation, be sure to follow us on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you stream your podcast from. We'll see you next time for another great conversation.
Namaste.
Thank you for joining me on another episode of Conversations with Nick Thompson. If you enjoyed the show, be sure to follow us and leave a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. Links can be found in the description below, and we can't wait to see you next time.